Good evening, everybody. Dr. Vasquez here, coming to you live. And right now I'm going to talk about chemical or xenobiotic or pesticide exposure and how your body has to deal with that in terms of nutrition and so-called detoxification. So I'll try to keep this short for practicality, but also because I'm going to draw this out on my iPad. And right now my iPad is at 12%. It is plugged in, but sometimes it discharges faster than it recharges. So that may put a limit on how long I can talk, which is probably a good thing. So the other good news, in addition to this video, speaking of videos, the other good news for the day is that I expect reasonably that within this hard drive, which I just received today, I expect that this contains all of the lost videos from my Vimeo account. So, as most of you know, I was recently kicked off of Vimeo after having 2 accounts there for 15 years. So it's a total of 30 years of paying for that service. And I used it, and for its time, it was the appropriate service to use. Now we of course have other platforms for sharing videos, but for its time, for professional level videos, it was probably the best platform out there, especially for educational videos. So they deleted all my videos without warning, and the only reason they gave was because I had criticized. So we're in 2025 right now. I had done a video where I criticized Anthony Fauci. I had done that 2 years ago in May of 2023, and they apparently thought that it was misinformation for me to criticize Anthony Fauci. That was the part 3 video of that series, which ultimately I think went to 4 or 5 sections. And in that section of the video, I think I said something like, he's a psychopath. Most of the things he said about COVID were wrong and have been proven to be wrong, but they were more or less obviously wrong at the time for those of us in medicine. It was the biggest scandal that we're probably going to have in our lifetime, but our lifetime's not over yet, and more scandals will come. I think I also said that he was guilty, if not of murder, then certainly of manslaughter. And maybe I said a few other things, but that's the gist of it. And I stand by all of those things. I still think they're correct. So if they kicked me off for that reason, then more power to them and they can fuck off. But because they deleted my videos faster than I could download them, I had to go back into my old hard drives and try to recover those old videos. I do remember for a little while, I was uploading things to Vimeo thinking that that was the safest possible place to put things. And obviously they proved me wrong, all these years later. But I do remember when we were still living in Spain, for a while, I did put a few videos on Vimeo that I didn't save to hard drive. And I'm hoping that I backed them up. So I had 2 external hard drives that I used literally for decades. Well, I don't know about decades, but for many years. And they were the 2 most important hard drives that I had. They were both Toshiba, and they both failed. So the biggest bulk of downloaded videos and academic documents and things like that were saved to these Toshiba hard drives, and then they both failed. So that's why I had to pay $1,000 to get them salvaged onto this, ironically enough, Toshiba hard drive, which I hope works. I don't have the proper. Actually, I guess I do, because I have both my computers with me. I was about to say I don't have the proper cable, but if I use my old computer, I could access the disk, but that's actually not correct, because supposedly they formatted it for Mac, but I don't have the appropriate cable to connect to my Mac, so I can't access it right now because of cable and platform mismatches. So anyway, let's talk about pesticides. Today I had a personal exposure to pesticides. I wasn't expecting that, but I was in this space, cleaning up this little office space that I have, and I took out a piece of furniture that had been left over from the previous occupants of this space, and behind the furniture was some white dust. which I thought was just sheetrock dust or plaster dust or whatever. So I didn't think anything of it whatsoever. But as I was vacuuming up that dust, what became very clear is that it was ant poison. I could tell by the smell. I'll have to look up, I don't even know how I would look it up, but I could try to look it up to see what kind of poison it was, but it was definitely some type of pesticide, either a natural derivative or something totally synthetic. I mean, it could be DDT for all I know. But apparently they had put some type of pesticide back there for whatever reason behind the furniture, which for them may have been a reasonable choice. But for me, getting rid of that old furniture and trying to clean it up, when I was vacuuming up that dust, what became very clear very fast was that, like I said, it was a pesticide. I'm going to close my window real quick. Hold on just a second. Just to avoid. Hold on, let me close. One more. Just to avoid street noise or whatever. So, like I said, I got rid of this old piece of furniture. Behind it was some white dust. Turned out to be some type of insecticide, presumably some type of ant poison. But it got stuck. It was, of course, then it was in the filter system of the vacuum. So as soon as I smelled what it was, I opened all the windows and took the vacuum downstairs and eventually tried to empty it out. But it's a cloth filter and, I couldn't get rid of all the pesticide. So as I was hanging a few pieces of art, like this one and that one, I had to drill holes in the wall, and I was drilling the holes in the wall and, aspirating or vacuuming out the dust as it was being created. So I had repeated exposure to this. I think it was probably relatively minimal, but it was still something. I mean, I could still smell it. Every time I activated the vacuum, I could smell this insecticide, pesticide. So for that reason, I started thinking about detoxification pathways and all this kind of stuff. So for those of you who have never studied pharmacology, or those of you who haven't studied pharmacology in decades, or for those of you who studied pharmacology and you never really got a good practical takeaway, I'm going to talk about detoxification right now. Everybody talks about detox. I reasonably suspect that a lot of people who talk about it don't know what they're talking about. So let's talk about detoxification. So let's assume reasonably and correctly that in my case, for example, I was working in this space today trying to straighten it out, and excuse me, had some inhalation exposure to pesticides. The route, in this case, the route of administration, I don't really think it matters that much. I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. Obviously, I inhaled whatever this dust was, but it could also be, glyphosate in your genetically modified corn or soy products or whatever, especially if you're in the United States. So the question that I'm going to answer is, how does the body deal with chemical exposure? So chemical is kind of a casual term, and it's certainly appropriate. You probably have noticed by now that sometimes in medicine or nutrition or whatever, we use a term called xenobiotics. And xenobiotics is basically the same thing. Xenobiotics just means foreign chemical. So whether we say chemical or foreign chemical, it's still kind of a foreign item. So a good model for talking about chemical exposure or pollution exposure or pesticide exposure is to use an example of something like benzene. So I'll try to draw benzene if I can. I barely remember what it is, but I think it's this. Yeah. So here's benzene, sorry. That's a benzene ring. So let's say that you are pumping gas and you happen to be breathing while you're pumping gas. Well, your body has to do something with the benzene that you just inhaled from pumping gas. So what your body does, so that you would inhale gas or you'd get it on your skin and it would get absorbed into your blood, but eventually it would go around to body tissues. Most gloriously, it would go to your liver, because that's where most detoxification takes place. So your body would take this chemical or poison or pesticide. We could call it a chemical. We could call it a xenobiotic. We could call it we could call it pollution. We could call it, it could be like a petroleum-derived pesticide, like I had today. Or for those of you who live in countries saturated with glyphosate, you could think of glyphosate. So your body takes, well, your body has been now exposed to this chemical, and your body has to do something with this chemical. And the typical 3 steps are, so step number 1, step number 2, and then we'll do step number 3. The first step is oxidation, sometimes also referred to as activation. And that's when the body attaches some type of moiety or biochemical structure to this. Your body's going to structurally and physically change this molecule, typically by adding some type of hydroxyl group or some type of free radical group. Now, at this point, this is what we call phase 1. So phase 1 is an oxidation or activation reaction where your body, again, attaches through a free radical generating process some type of moiety. And let's just assume it's a hydroxyl radical like this. Now, at this point, see, the reason that your body has to do this is because the benzene itself is not water soluble. So your body is trying to make something from petroleum or a pesticide or a chemical or gasoline. Your body's trying to turn that into something that's water soluble because you have to excrete this, for example, out through the urine or through your kidneys or through sweat. And so to facilitate that excretion, your body has to make this fat-soluble item into something water-soluble. So we do this oxidation reaction. Again, it can happen in any body tissue, but it typically happens in the liver. So now this is slightly more water-soluble, but not completely. It could be better. However, because we've attached a radical onto this, or a reactive group onto this, for those of you who have studied kind of higher levels of pharmacology, then you would appreciate that this is also now called, even though it's slightly more water soluble, so we're going in the right direction, but we actually created something more dangerous in the process. And this is called a reactive intermediate. So again, even though we are now engaged in the process of converting a water-soluble poison into something that's inert or water-soluble, sorry, let me make sure I said that correct. We're in the process of converting a fat-soluble toxin into something that's water-soluble and then could be excreted. So the first step is oxidation or activation. We add, for example, an OH group to make it slightly more water-soluble, also slightly more reactive. And at that point, yes, it's more water-soluble, but it's also more reactive. And as I already said, we call that a reactive intermediate. So the danger here is that this can now react with proteins, DNA, and other structures like enzymes, which of course are protein. So again, we're trying to detoxify something that was fat soluble. We're trying to make it water soluble. The first step of that is oxidation. That creates what we call a reactive intermediate, which could actually be more dangerous. What we want to do to take this to the next step is take this reactive intermediate and attach something onto it. We're gonna attach onto this same group that we've already discussed. We're gonna add something. It could be sulfur, it could be glycine, it could be glutathione, which is kind of expensive because that uses 3 amino acids. It could be taurine, I believe. Those are the ones I think about most commonly. So step 2 is what we call conjugation. No, conjugation. So that conjugation just means attaching two things together. So onto this radical or hydroxy group, we're going to add sulfur, we're going to add glycine, or we're going to add glutathione. And at this point, most of the toxic properties of this item have now been neutralized, and it is now water soluble because, for example, glutathione is a relatively big molecule. So it balances out the fact that what we started with was non-polar, fat soluble. And because we added a big glutathione onto it, now it's more water soluble and now can be excreted. So that's the next step in detoxification. Everybody knows what that is. Excretion. If it's a big molecule, probably bigger than benzene, then it's going to go out in the bile. If it's a relatively small molecule, especially if it's attached with something like sulfur or glycine, then it's going to go out in the urine. But you'll notice that the conjugation process costs nutrition. It costs protein specifically. It costs sulfur from sulfur amino acids. It costs glycine from protein. It costs glycine, cysteine, and glutamine in the form of glutathione, or it costs taurine. But without sufficient nutrition, especially protein, this conjugation step is going to be impaired. You'll also remember that I said that this addition of a radical group is a free radical generating process. So in order to attach a free radical, we have to create a free radical. So this process generates reactive oxygen species, and those also cause damage. So those can damage nuclear DNA, mitochondrial DNA, proteins, enzymes, fatty acids, things like that. So the very occurrence or the very event of being exposed to pesticides or poison or pollution or glyphosate, that it is inherently expensive from a nutritional standpoint. Your body has to have the coenzymes available in order to generate these free radicals. Your body has to have antioxidants in order to protect from those free radicals. And then to conjugate, your body has to have adequate protein. And then we have to excrete this. So again, like I said, if it's a big molecule, it's going to go out in the bile. If it's relatively small, it's going to go out in the urine. So let's take this benzene, which was oxidized and then conjugated, and now let's assume for a moment that we're going to excrete it through the bile. Some of it, for sure, will go into the bile. If we have what we call generally bowel stasis or constipation or dysbiosis in the gut due to too many bad bacteria, those bad bacteria can actually deconjugate or separate the toxin from its nutrient that was used expensively. Deconjugating bacteria with their enzymes can separate that toxin from glutathione or sulfur or glucuronic acid or whatever, and then that toxin can get reabsorbed. So that's why you want to avoid constipation and dysbiosis when and if you're exposed to chemicals, and you're exposed to chemicals every day, which means you should try to avoid gastrointestinal stasis, constipation, dysbiosis. So again, this is why you want to eat not necessarily a vegetarian or vegan diet, but you certainly want to have enough fiber in your diet so that you're not constipated, and make sure you have plenty of magnesium and enough thyroid hormone, etc., so that you can move this stuff out. You don't want this stuff sitting in your gut for 2 or 3 days, getting deconjugated and then reabsorbed, because that makes you vulnerable to the toxicity of this poison that you're trying to get rid of. Similarly, most chemicals are more easily excreted through the urine if the urine pH is alkaline, which is, let's say, a pH of 7 to 8.5. So I've talked about this before. You can see my previous comments and blogs and videos about urine pH. I'll try to include them on the same page where I put this video. But this again goes back to a balanced diet, so to speak, or a diet with adequate protein, because again, you need protein for conjugation, but you also need fiber and phytochemicals and alkalinization, which you mostly get from plant foods, in order to keep your guts moving and also to have an alkaline urine pH so that you can successfully excrete these things. So I think that explanation was adequate. You of course can watch the video again, or maybe watch it again in a couple of days, and it'll probably have a different level of meaning to you. But again, I had some exposure today, unintentionally of course, to some pesticides. So I was thinking about these pathways. So what's the solution here in terms of nutrition? Well, let's just go through each of the steps. So again, for oxidation, that creates free radicals. So that's why you need antioxidants. For conjugation, that relies on glucuronic acid, of course, but beyond glucuronic acid, it relies on amino acids from protein. So what do I want to say? Amino acids, so protein, and then excretion. If it's going out through the bile, I mean, you can do other things. From a naturopathic standpoint, I haven't even scratched the surface of this. From a medical standpoint, I've probably said more than enough. If we're going out through the bile, then you just want to make sure that your guts are moving and you're avoiding stasis or constipation that would predispose you then to deconjugation and reabsorption of the pesticide, of the chemical, of the benzene, or of your own hormones. Your body gets rid of your own hormones in a similar way. So a good solution here is plenty of plants, plant matter, plant fiber, etc. If we're going out through the urine, then we need an alkaline pH, which again requires consumption of fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, berries for their citric acid, which your body converts into bicarbonate, which of course makes you more alkaline. So again, now you've got the conceptual frame, the pharmacology framework is here, the physiology and biochemistry is here, and then the action steps are here. Excuse me. Sorry. Speaking of action steps, you want to make sure that you're well hydrated. Oops. So that you can urinate those poisons out. You want to make sure that your guts are also hydrated and full of fiber, phytochemicals. Like in this case, I'm drinking a fruit juice. Because again, you need the citric acid, which you get from fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, berries. You need that citric acid so your body can turn that into bicarbonate so that you can then excrete these toxins. Hope you're all doing well. Feel free, of course, to watch the video again if you want to, but that's the quick rundown of how your body gets rid of toxins. And obviously this is all accurate and complete. We could certainly take it farther, but I think this is grossly sufficient for 80% of what you need to know, 80 or 90% of what you need to know. Okay, hope you're all doing well. Take care. Bye.